Hi guys, it's Steph from IDRIVEACLASSIC and today I'm back in another Triumph, but today it's a Triumph Herald from 1969 and it's amazing. So I'm going to show you around the outside of the car, show you the inside, start her up so you can hear how she sounds, and then we're going to take her for a drive. Now if you recognise this car, it may be because it was on the Pride of Ownership stand at the NEC this year, but finally I'm getting to go beyond a spectator to be a driver. So let's take her for a ride and see how she sounds.
Usually as I walk you around a car, I show you all the different elements, but today I wanted to chat to you about the man who styled this car, and he is called Giovanni Micheletti. Now, if you watched my video when I went around Crow's Nest, I kind of gave you a little bit of a brief summary of what he'd done, but I thought, whilst showing you around one of his creations, what better way than to shoehorn in a little bit of information and tell you a little bit about the amazing man who styled and designed this car, because as you look at it, it's something special. And that's probably because the chap himself had an amazing CV of brands that he'd worked with and cars that he'd worked on, and he worked with Ferrari, Lancia, Maserati, Triumph and DAF, which I'm going to come back to later because you may not know much about DAF. And he also did, slightly unglamorously, truck designs for Leyland Motors. Now Micheletti was a guy who did quite a lot for Triumph, and he styled the Herald, the Spitfire, the GT6, the TR4, the Triumph 2000, the Triumph 1300, the Triumph Stag and the Dolomite. So I mean, it's quite an impressive back catalogue really. Now, whilst working with British Leyland, he did a facelift on the Austin, well, what I call the Austin 1100, and created the Austin Victoria, which we don't have in the UK. But if you are in the UK and have one, I would love to take one out for a drive. Now, as I was saying about DAF, a fun fact for you, I did actually go and look at a DAF 44 myself, and it was a completely new design that Micheletti came up with. And the DAF 44, the reason I didn't pick it wasn't because of the styling, because it is a really stylish car. It's because it runs on these weird belts and I just couldn't get my head around it. But it's very interesting to see that somebody, you know, imagine having that much confidence in your career to say, I'll work on anything from DAF, not exactly an iconic brand in terms of, you know, these big names that you hear everywhere, right through to Maserati. I mean, what an incredible guy. And as you look around this car, you're probably noticing all sorts of things, and I'm sure you'll agree, this is a design which truly stands out now, and I would agree then too.
So this is the 1300, there was the 1200 and the 1250 starting in 1959 running up to 71. This is a 69 car, so the 1300 distinguished by the front headlights. So we've got a single SU inline 4-cylinder engine, original radiator, original fan, original alternator. You've got your screen washer here, your wiper motor, clutch fluid, brake fluid or vice versa, whichever way they go round. The majority of it is original. There's a few creature comforts put in, new HT leagues, etc. The only problem I've had with it is a lazy solenoid to start it every other day in the winter, but it always gets up and goes, and no fuel pumps, so you just need to give it a bit of throttle when you're going off. Apart from that, it's a very reliable engine.
Guys, it's my favourite part of the video. We're going to start the car. Now, this is a 1300 and we've been out for a little drive already. So I've been taken out by George. He's driven me round and it's quite nippy. I said to him, what is under the bonnet? And he said, oh, it's only a 1300. So let's start it up because it sounds really nice. So if you listen to that, the engine sounds very smooth as it's running, and you can tell that it's a well-maintained engine, because sometimes these engines sound quite tappety, they sound quite rattly, but this one is running a very smooth note. So now that we've started the car, let's stop the footage because we're going to buckle up and we're going to drive on and take this car out for a drive. Guys, honestly, this car's so cool. I've just set off and I'm still getting a feel for it, so you're with me as I get to grips with the car myself. And one of the things that struck me straight away is, and that you'll notice I'm sat right over here, is that all the pedals are offset to the right. It's quite a pronounced set off to the right as well. So much so that when I went to hit the brake, I hit the clutch. But I'm starting to get my head around it now, and it's a really nice car to drive. And I'm jealous of George, because if I'd had one of these at 17, I honestly would have felt like I'd won at life. One of the things that I spotted just now actually. Shows you how often I check my mirrors. Is that we don't have wing mirrors, but again, as I've talked about in some of my other reviews, one of the most beautiful things about classic cars is that you get really good visibility all the way round, and it makes life a lot easier because I can look over my shoulder and I can see everything. I feel like there's not really a massive blind spot in this car, and this era of cars, so like 1960s cars, they are my favourite. I would say they're definitely my favourite because you're not working with a small engine. You know, everything seems to be quite on point, and I love the styling of 60s cars as well. And this doesn't disappoint. Everything right from, you know, the first glance to sitting behind the steering wheel. Everything about this car it feels really luxurious, actually, if I'm being honest. And I just love it. One of the really interesting things that George and I were discussing was that these cars weren't just marketed as cars, or, you know, oh, this is our latest car. These were marketed at women. So the Triumph Herald was a car that they said, right, that's what the woman's going to drive. And nowadays you wouldn't see that so much because, you know, cars nowadays are marketed at families, or they're marketed at businessmen or people that are doing a lot of travelling. But back in the day, cars were marketed as, you know, a man's car or a woman's car. And as I drive this, I said to George, I'm quite a short woman. In fact, very interesting fact, I'm the average height of a woman in the 1960s, and I'm struggling to reach the pedals. So I do wonder if perhaps other women struggled as well, but I suppose they were probably wearing high heels and not their trusty flat shoes from Clark's. One of the things that I really hate about modern cars is, and I'm sorry if I'm going to upset anybody by saying this, the seats feel so sloppy, like, oh, I'm all over the place. Whereas in a proper car like this, you sit up properly and everything feels a little bit more formal, if I'm being honest. But I quite like that about a motoring experience. I hate this whole, and I can do it in the Metro actually, and I've adjusted the Metro seats to sit bolt upright like they are in the Morris Minor. I hate this culture of seats being far back, things being, you know, it's just not for me. And everything in this car still feels very real. Like I feel like I can hear the engine. I feel like I'm connected to the car. Whereas that is one of the things that I really dislike about modern cars, and I think the owner of this car, George, would agree with me on actually, is that in a modern car you feel very disconnected from what's actually going on, and you almost feel like you're just being teleported round in this massive computer with these plush seats. Whereas in this it feels a bit more like, I don't know, it just harks back really to a world that we don't live in anymore, that's a little bit more formal, a little bit more, you know, a little bit more present, a little bit more kind of down the line. And I quite like that, and I quite like everything about this car. And I feel like if I was to go and look for another car, I think this would actually be quite a good, now that I'm really into it, now that I've got over my issues with the pedals being off to one side, I feel like honestly this is a car that you could drive every day. It feels quite sturdy as well, and that's something I like about a car. I think if you get into a car and it feels a bit flimsy, you can be reminded sometimes that there's not actually much between you and another car if it crashes into you. And with this, it feels sturdy enough that you feel quite safe in it. I really like that about this car.
I have really loved driving this car today, and it's so hard sometimes to remember all the technical facts to spew out at you when I'm driving along. So as we go for a little bit of a drive through a bit of rural West Yorkshire, I thought I'd have a chat with you a little bit about the Triumph Herald and tell you a few little key facts and a couple of little bits of trivia too. So the Triumph Herald was made from 1959 to 1971, and if you're someone who likes a bit of choice, you could have had a saloon, a convertible, a coupe, an estate, or even a van. And one of the signs of a good car that I've found as I've kind of taken them out and I learn a little bit about cars is cars that were good were made all over the world. Cars that were a little bit maybe not market leaders, were maybe only made in one place or have very limited numbers. And this car was made all over the world, and it was made in Coventry. And for those of you tuning in from abroad, Coventry is in the Midlands in England, and it's really the kind of hub of car manufacturing in the UK. And they were also made in Australia, Belgium, Ireland, New Zealand, the Philippines and South Africa. Although honestly I don't know how people get in anything other than the convertible in hot countries, because it is boiling without aircon in these cars in summer. Now, if you've been watching my videos regularly, you'll have seen that I took out a Triumph Toledo last week, and the Triumph Toledo was the successor to the Herald, so I feel like I'm moving back in time, so God knows what I'll be in next week. And this particular model, as I've kind of said earlier in the video, is the Herald 1360, and it was introduced in 1967, and it ran until the end of the Triumph Herald in 1971. And in the 1360 you could have gone for a saloon, a convertible or an estate body. And I always love chucking in a bit of trivia, and sunroofs were an optional extra. And for those of you that are saying, oh well, it looks a little bit different to the 1250, that's because they updated it slightly, and they went for a front end which was slightly restyled to look like the Vitesse, and the interior was updated as well. But Triumph must have liked the wooden dash as much as me, because it's something that they've kept as they've gone through the facelifts on the Herald, and then as you get into the Toledo as well, you've still got that wooden dash as well. And I do think actually it's quite an attractive feature. So a couple of interesting facts to impress your friends with down the pub. I feel like such a geek telling you all this. The Triumph Herald was used at the 2012 London Olympics closing ceremony, so they had a car parade and the Triumph Herald was within that. And the Bond Equip, my pronunciation is always terrible, it actually uses the Triumph Herald chassis and components. So it's quite interesting really, and it's one of those things that you do tend to find is that cars of this era do tend to kind of borrow quite heavily sometimes from one model to the next, or one manufacturer to the next, and it's actually quite interesting because you don't see so much of it anymore. Now I'm going to wrap up my little drive around West Yorkshire and say goodbye to you all, and it has been truly a fantastic drive, and I have had such a laugh today.
Guys, today has been amazing. I've had so much fun in this Triumph Herald. We've been all over the place, and thankfully the owner of the car lives really close to me, so we've been able to explore all the local areas, and it's so much fun. And I think I'm almost becoming converted to the world of Triumph cars. I've done the TL7, I've done the Dolomite, and now I've done the Herald, and I think now I'm ready to get on eBay and find one for myself. So if you've enjoyed this video as much as I've enjoyed driving this car, don't forget to hit like. Any comments, leave me in the comments section below, and don't forget to hit subscribe, because new videos go up every Wednesday and every Sunday. Now until next time, take care and drive safely.